At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams. We'll talk about the Saints, of course, 3-2 at the bye week. We'll get into the Tigers. We'll talk about what's happening with LSU in terms of, again, the season. Also, a possible coaching search. Not possible. They're going to be looking for a coach at the end of the season here. Also, the Ring of Fame with Sam Mills going into it. We'll expound on that a bit. Pelicans, we'll talk about Zion probably not ready. There's a press conference this afternoon with David Griffin in which he's going to let the media know if Zion will be ready for the opening of the regular season. Everything we're hearing right now is he will not be. Again, but we'll find out, again, probably after this program is over, whether that comes to fruition or not. And also Tulane, possible regionalization and realignment within the conferences. So we'll get into all that. And to break it down for us, award-winning journalist Les East, an accomplished author. He joins us on the program. Les, how are you?
Doing well, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a full slate, right?
Yeah, it is.
That is a full slate, no doubt.
Busy time of year,
yeah,
and a lot of stuff happening.
Before we get started, tell the folks about who you're writing for, and then if you would also talk about the book for a second as well. Let the folks know about your book.
Great, thanks. First of all, the book is called Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes. It's a political novel. It is available online in ebook and paperback format, all the major outlets online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. And there's some connections to sports and politics and the media, so
always.
Hopefully, absolutely. So hopefully folks will find it interesting. But on the day-to-day basis, of course, writing for CrescentCitySports.com. So much to write about now with the Saints, Pelicans, LSU, Tulane. Right. So every day I have something new to think about, to write about. So I'm enjoying that. Doing Ken Trahan's original prep football report in conjunction with Crescent City Sports and Nash Icon with working with Jude Young and Ken. And tomorrow night we'll be back at it with the most comprehensive prep football scoreboard and show in the state. And I'm also covering LSU for SaturdayDownSouth.com.
Can I tell you how much I love the outfit?
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I feel like I need a glass of cognac and a nice cigar, and you and I could just be chilling, talking a little sports.
Well, maybe as soon as the show's over, we can do that.
Maybe that should have happened before the show started today.
That might have been helpful.
Where's the cigars?
And I have to compliment you. October, you have the pink tie.
You know, I'm always
That's appropriate.
There you go. I mean, my wife even complimented me this afternoon as we were getting ready to leave, telling me about that I always remember October in pink. I forgot it last week, sorry, but yes, I do remember. There you go. Let's start with the Saints. 3-2. They beat the Washington football team 33-22. This is really like on the first quarter of the season in a 17-game season. What are your thoughts on where this team is?
I think they're okay. I wrote about this after the Washington game at CrescentCitySports.com. I think under the circumstances with the displacement because of the hurricane and so many key players being absent, that 3-2 is okay. 4-1 is probably the best you could have hoped for. Yes. And they should have been 4-1 if they could have made a couple of plays late against the Giants. They would have been 4-1. So I think they're probably kicking themselves a little bit for letting that game get away. But nonetheless, they're one game behind Tampa Bay in the division. This is usually when they kind of go on a run in recent seasons, and they're going to start getting key players back. We don't know the exact timetable because they're so secretive of that, but over the next couple of months, you're going to see 8 or 9 key players come back gradually. So when they hit the stretch run, they are going to be a much more talented team than they are right now, assuming they don't lose people who are currently available.
And let me throw that out there for the audience in case they don't know. Teron Armstead, Eric McCoy, Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith, Nick Vannett, the tight end, who we've not seen yet, came over from Denver. Tony Jones, who was injured a couple weeks back. Also, Will Lutz eventually coming back on special teams. Davenport, Quan Alexander, Ken Crawley, all expected to come back from injury reserve, and then not the week of the Seattle Seahawks game, but the following week, David Onyemata will be eligible to come back from suspension. So that is a huge amount of quality players that are coming back. Also, you look at the situation right now with Harris, who had the hamstring injury. Hopefully a couple of weeks off will give him a chance to get back on the field quickly. And the same thing with Taysom Hill with the concussion as well. So that is huge for this team. But look, you can't control injuries, right? I mean, these guys could be coming back and other guys could be getting injured, but you're hoping that these reinforcements are really going to help you as you get into the second quarter of the season.
Yeah, and I think what's important about that is you just read them all off. They're scattered all over the team. So, the offensive line gets healthy, they're going to run the ball better, and they're going to pass protect better. They're going to get 2 wide receivers back and maybe a tight end back. They're going to get 2 defensive linemen, a linebacker, and a defensive back. So the defense should be better across the board. So they should evolve as a team significantly, I think. Now, again, we don't know the timetable other than David Onyemata, but right now, Will Lutz is looking bigger and bigger every week, getting him back. They're on their 4th potential replacement.
Brian Johnson, they pulled off the practice squad from the Bears?
Yeah, that's their 4th attempt at replacing him.
He's got to be on the active roster 3 weeks, right?
Right, so that could mean they're expecting Lutz to miss 3 more games, or it could mean they're not sure and they're willing to carry this guy to kick off and ease Lutz back in. So I don't know that he's necessarily out for all of those games, but it makes you assume he's not going to be back for Seattle at least. And then, the offensive linemen are so important. And I think Armstead's probably more long-term than McCoy. But if they could get McCoy back for Seattle, that would be helpful. If they could have both of them back by, say, mid-season or shortly thereafter, I think that would be really significant. And then Marcus Davenport would be important because the pass rush has been lacking.
What's interesting is a little bit shaky for Ruiz as he started back at the center position. He has played well the last 2 weeks. He really has kind of gotten into a groove in that position, getting back to playing center, which again is his natural position anyway. But again, McCoy he could be an all-pro center in terms of, again, his ability, what he's been able to do since coming out of A&M. The other thing is Armstead coming back, as you mentioned. That's a reinforcement there. Also, I talked about this week on the radio show. The offensive line's still getting used to Jameis Winston, okay? And there's a period here now where, once again, when you get all these guys back, that they're going to have to be able to, again, get a feel for where he is. It's a different offense now in terms of when they drop back to pass. Breeze was a guy that stepped up in the pocket. You could visualize it in your mind's eye, going through his progression, stepping up in the pocket, on his tippy toes, letting the ball go. When you look at Jameis Winston, he does not step up in the pocket. His arm is strong enough that in a lot of cases, again, he's still standing back 7-8 yards back and letting the ball just rip. So if you're an offensive lineman, you got to kind of figure out where he is, as opposed to, you always knew where Breeze was for the most part if you're an offensive lineman. I think that's part of what we saw with the situation with Pete stepping on his foot, with maybe some of these sacks that we've seen where, again, the offensive lineman kind of probably not sure where he is. So there is a still a period here where there's an adjustment period from going from Breeze to Winston, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's going to be ongoing.
Yes.
You know, that it's not going to, the light's not going to suddenly go on in week 5, 6, 7 or whatever. That's going to evolve over the course of the season. But I do think they deserve a lot of credit for the improvements since the Carolina game. Carolina game was a disaster for the offensive line, and part of that was obviously the blocking.
Yes.
Part of that was Jameis not being in sync with them in identifying blockers. Part of that was the absence of coaches because of COVID.
That's a great point.
And Carolina took advantage of it, and it all caved in on them at once. But we have not seen that since then. The communication has gotten better. They identified the problems, they focused on it, and they've gotten better. It's still a work in progress, but I think the fact that they have not had a repeat of those communication issues that they had in Carolina is significant, and I think it shows that they're on the right track. Getting those two guys healthy is imperative for them to be as good as they can eventually be.
Although, I will say this, and this is all the time, they have great coaches there that are great teachers, and you see it on the offensive line. They normally don't miss a beat when they have to go to their backups. They have quality backups on this team. And that is, again, losing guys, we've seen over the years that have been mainstays in terms of, again, filling in when there's an injury. So I give a tremendous amount of credit to Jeff Ireland and also to the coaches as well. They don't seem to miss a beat when you have to go to a backup, where other teams, it's a gaping hole at times.
Yeah, and two guys worth mentioning, James Hurst, who's playing left tackle in place of Armstead.
Right.
You're not seeing guys come clean, you're not hearing holding penalties.
Right.
And he did this last year. He had to go in and start a game or two, and you didn't notice him, which meant he was doing a good job. And of course, Calvin Throckmorton has he's had a couple of hiccups here and there, but all in all has done a very good job sliding in at right guard. They had an opportunity, if they wanted to use Will Clapp and put Ruiz back at right guard when Will got healthy, they could have done that. But I don't think they wanted to mess with the continuity they had developed with Throckmorton and Ruiz.
And also, Ruiz was starting to play well at center. And at that point, again, Will Clapp became the extra lineman. And it'll be interesting again how that plays out going forward. All right, Jameis Winston. So many people all over the place with their opinions of Jameis Winston. I happen again think that he's doing a very, very good job up to this point. It is a tough transition from where he was to where he is now in terms of the type of quarterback they're asking him to be. I think he's done everything he can to protect the football for the most part. There's still a work in progress here in terms of, again, understanding what his strengths and weaknesses are within this offense. I think they're getting through that, him and Peyton. But I think for the most part, when you look at 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 1 fumble, I mean, I don't think you can ask for much more from Jameis Winston thus far in terms of, again, quarterbacking this team.
I agree, and you said the key thing there, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That was the biggest concern, is a turnover.
Plus, he's a fumbler.
Yeah, and he had the 1 fumble, which was not totally his fault because the guy came clean on him. But so the turnovers have not been a major issue, although he had 2 bad ones in Carolina. But overall, that's been really good, and I think that's the bottom line. But I think what I've learned over these first 5 weeks, and maybe others have too, looking at this, is this is not Jameis Winston running the offense that Drew Brees ran, and it's not Sean Payton trying to take the Tampa Bay Jameis Winston and just fix him. Okay, you have Jameis Winston's skill set over here, and you have Sean Payton's offense over here that was tailored around Drew Brees. And they're moving those two together, and they're trying to figure out how they overlap so that Jameis can be Jameis in Peyton's offense and not trying to imitate Drew Brees because he's a different type of quarterback. And I think they've done a really good job so far of merging those two concepts, but it's a work in progress again, and that's going to evolve over the season. But I would say at this point they're on schedule, and fans should be satisfied with where the quarterback situation is right now.
And doing this with a receiving core that really, again, at times has shown flashes of brilliance. but at times, again, struggled to get open, struggled to be able to give, to be able to catch the football at times. I mean, again, this is going to change, I think, as we start to see some of these reinforcements come in. And he'll have better pass catchers out there for him, more refined NFL players than guys that are journeymen.
Well, certainly, Mike Thomas is going to make such a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about 8 or 9 catches a game. With him just loosening up that defense, he's so reliable, gets open, catches the ball, hard to tackle. That's going to make a huge difference. But beyond that, you've seen the couple of deep balls to Deontay Harris for touchdowns, even the one that was called back that went to Kenny Stills. Right. So already defenses are having to respect the deep ball more than they have in recent years, and that's why Alvin Kamara is getting more touches in the run game and being more effective. So it's going to be a different offense than it was under Drew. It may not be as good, but it should be good enough, and I think it's going to evolve week after week.
I think we'll see more shock and awe like we saw maybe in Breeze's prime than we've seen toward the latter stage of Breeze's career because of his arm strength. And I think we'll start to see more of that, which, as you mentioned, means the defense has to be able to cover the entire field. Now, you mentioned Kamara. Last week, 16 carries, 71 yards, 5 catches, 51 yards, a touchdown. To me, that is perfect for Kamara as opposed to 24 carries, 26 carries as he had in the 2 previous games. Those physical carries take their toll on Kamara. I thought this past week that's exactly what you need out of Alvin Kamara week in, week out.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's what Sean Payton is shooting for, but he's also aware that individual opponents and circumstances dictate deviating from that. And certainly the injury to Tony Jones Jr. impacted that. I guess it was in the Giants game where he wound up with a career high in carries and no targets.
Who is because I think they need a physical backup. They went and got a Zebo. He didn't see any time last week in terms of running the football. But, I mean, at some point they've got to have a physical running back, much like they had with Murray, like we've seen, again, throughout Payton's tenure here. Yeah. Who is that guy?
Well, I'm not sure anybody is designated in that role right now. Certainly Dwayne Washington could be a ball carrier. He's shown flashes when he's gotten the opportunity, but he's also a key special teams guy. They don't want to use him too much in that regard. Alex Armagh could probably get a carry here and there if they want a physical presence, being primarily a fullback. And then Ty Montgomery is sort of a wild card that they can work in
How about
there.
Taysom Hill? Is he your more physical back right now?
Yeah, he probably would be when he's available, and he could be back for Seattle.
Right.
Yeah, he's probably the next guy who's going to get the most opportunities. And I like the way they used him. They used that sort of jet sweep a couple of games ago that they sometimes use with Deontay Harris. And when Taysom Hill gets a head of steam going, he is so hard to tackle.
Yes.
And that's such a good play for him because he's already got a head of steam going before he ever touches the ball. So he's a guy they can use in a lot of ways. So as far as a physical presence, somebody you can maybe handle 5 or 6 carries a game, I think Taysom's probably their best option.
The defense has looked solid at times, looked not so good at times. The biggest issue right now seems to be the lack of pressure on the quarterback. A lot of people believe when Onyemata comes back, that's going to change because there was just a stat that went out, I think it was a next-gen stat that showed that the Saints' defensive ends are getting double-teamed more than anybody else in the NFL. They're in the top 5 when you start talking about their defensive ends at this point. Talk about the pass rush. And do you think it is cured when we see Onyemata with more of a rush from the inside? We've seen Patino at times give him a little bit of a pass rush from the inside, but we know what Onyemata can do. Obviously, the guys they have right now are not able to do that.
Yeah, Onyemata, his return will help. Davenport's presumed return will help, probably farther down the road. But it's funny how things change. You know, when they went into training camp, the depth on the defensive line was probably the biggest strength on the team. Linebackers are the biggest question mark, along with the secondary because of cornerback.
True.
Now, cornerback, Sean Payton called it an area of strength.
Right.
Well, picking up Roby and because of Adebo playing well.
Well, they just cut Poole and Trufant.
Yeah.
2 guys they brought in that thought were going to be, again, parts of not just guys that were quality depth, but guys that were going to play.
Right. So the secondary, particularly cornerback,
Yes.
has gotten better.
I agree.
Linebacker Pete Werner suddenly is a factor.
13
there.
tackles last week, 8 solo.
And, he was even in there in the base defense. I was thinking he would be more of a nickel linebacker because he's not real physical, but he's holding up in the running game pretty well. And so they have depth at linebacker, even with Quan Alexander out. So now it's the defensive line we're talking about as not being up to par, and that's partly because of the injuries. I was a little surprised against the Giants that they didn't, when Daniel Jones got into a rhythm, that they didn't start blitzing a little bit more in the second half to try and get him off his mark. So I think maybe the play calling could have been a little more aggressive there to try and get a rush that the line was not generating on its own. But at some point, the line's going to have to generate a more consistent pass rush. Onyemata will help. I don't know that that solves the problem by itself.
And almost to your point, if you start to really feel a comfort level on that back end, and let's face it, Lattimore's having an all-pro season. Adebo's having an all-rookie season. You look at P.J. Williams, again, he has been a guy that has been a ball hawk for him. This might be Marcus Williams' best season thus far. Malcolm Jenkins, everybody's waiting for him to be able to drop off. He's played well. All of a sudden, you're in a position where maybe, again, now you can go back to maybe going straight up man-to-man with a guy like Roby that's also in the mix and Gardner Johnson, and allow, again, an opportunity to see more of an opportunistic blitzing, from Dennis Allen, whether it be on the second or third level, to really help that defense.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think the Seattle game is going to be interesting because you mentioned that stat about the ends being double teamed.
Yes.
Okay, the main thing they're going to be doing during the bye week this week is self-scouting.
No doubt.
And they're going to find out where they're becoming predictable and how opponents are taking advantage of them, and they're going to adjust to that. And they can afford to be a little more confident in their cover guys because of Adebo and Roby especially.
Yes.
And so Dennis Allen's going to be looking at all of that, seeing their tendencies up to this point, seeing who he can trust on the back end now and changing things up. And they're not going to be facing Russell Wilson in that game. They're going to be facing the guy from West Virginia, Geno
Smith.
Yeah, Geno Smith. So I think they will probably be more tempted to be aggressive against him than they would have been against Russell Wilson. So I would expect that the defensive game plan will look somewhat different in that Monday night game.
Give a lot of credit to Jeff Ireland once again. Peyton Turner, again, playing well. Maybe not as a force that maybe some people thought was. But you mentioned the situation at linebacker with Pete Werner and also Paulson Adebo. Those three players on all three levels are contributing, especially when you got a situation where you have injuries and you had question marks.
Yeah, there's no question. They've done a very good job, and this continues a pattern since 2017, really, where they have done a very good job drafting, haven't hit on everyone, and it's too early to judge some people, but I'm satisfied with what I've seen from Peyton Turner so far.
Yes.
You know, he was slowed by injury. He's a rookie playing a really difficult spot for a rookie to play, and yet he looks like he understands what he's supposed to be doing, and he hustles. He's very aggressive, very big, very strong. And, we talked about Werner and Adebo, and they've come through also. So, those high draft picks brought in to help the defense look like good picks.
I think this is a playoff team. Okay, I do. I mean, again, when I look now at the question marks going into the season, I think a lot of those question marks, again, to me, have been solved, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to get better when they get Michael Thomas back in terms of the offense. One of the big question marks was, again, who was Jameis Winston going to be? I think we've seen a little bit of a snapshot of who he can be going forward. I think it's a playoff team. Do you?
Probably. I think before the season I said 10-7, which would have put them right there.
I think that's a playoff.
Probably
playoff
would put them into the playoffs. I don't see anything. I probably would have expected 4-1 at this point instead of 3-2, but I wouldn't have anticipated as many absences, and they're probably all coming back. So yeah, I think this looks like a playoff team. Peyton has a track record of putting it all together when you get into October and November. and making a run. And the biggest question mark, like you said, Winston seems like it's being answered in a positive manner.
Yeah.
And you really had to like in the Giants game what you saw from Taysom Hill in getting back to that role that he didn't want to have to assume, but he did assume, and that run on the goal line where he broke all those tackles, and to see Winston go over and congratulate him, I just think that whole thing is played out about as well as you could have hoped for in terms of maximizing what both guys can contribute.
Yeah, I agree. And look, that could be derailed by a rash of injuries. You know, we can see that anywhere, but that can happen anywhere in the NFL. But again, you like where this team is. And look, I don't like the early bye week, but I thought the bye week was perfect this year based on, again, who they are, trying to figure out what they are, and of course the injuries they had to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. Normally, you would like the bye week to be later so you wouldn't have so many games in a row going down the stretch. But under these circumstances, they probably couldn't have picked a better time because of the injuries and going to Seattle, even without Russell Wilson. Playing in Seattle on a Monday night is not something, that's quite a challenge.
Yes.
So it's good that they have the bye week prior to that as well.
And of course, Peyton has a winning record coming out of the bye, so we'll see again how that kind of plays out going forward. Okay, we'll take a break. We come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the Ring of Honor, the Saints Ring of Honor. Sam Mills is going into that. Both Les and I have, again, strong opinions on that. Then we'll get into LSU. We'll talk about the season. We'll talk about what's ahead for Scott Woodward in terms of, again, the coaching search here. And then we'll get into Tulane with their realignment. And then, of course, Pelicans, they get ready to start their season. Going to try to jam that up in the last 30 minutes. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Les Cease of CrescentCitySports.com is our guest.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Les Cease of CrescentCitySports.com is our guest. Okay, Sam Mills finally goes into the Saints Ring of Honor. It was supposed to happen before Katrina. It didn't happen. We all know by now the story. Well, Sam Mills has a statue in front of the Carolina football stadium, but yet again, part of the famed Dome Patrol. He's never had his name in that Ring of Honor. On top of that, again, those of you that listen to the radio show, watch this TV show, know that I've been an advocate for a long, long time of the entire Dome Patrol being in that Ring of Honor, and also a statue of the Dome Patrol somewhere on the Superdome grounds. We know that eventually we're going to see a statue of Drew Brees. It's ridiculous that, again, that there's not a statue of the greatest linebacking corps in the history of the NFL that's out front of that dome. Also, the Ring of, in addition to the Ring of Honor, there was also once a Superdome Wall of Fame, which again preceded that. It had Archie Manning, Ricky Jackson, Dave Dixon, Eddie Robinson, Jim Finks, and Pistol Pete Maravich on there for their contributions to, again, that particular building. Dave Dixon, the father of the Superdome. Archie Manning, Ricky Jackson, the greatest Saints of all time up until, the Peyton era. What Pistol Pete Maravich did in terms of, again, what he did in the Dome with the record crowds and, of course, his showmanship. And then, of course, Eddie Robinson, again, one of the greatest coaches in the history of college football, the greatest coach in the history of the SWAC, and what he did, not just, again, for the Bayou Classic here in New Orleans, but, again, what what he did, and again, shaping the lives of so many young men in our state. That was never put back up. That, to me, is an oversight as well. There was another oversight, again, not having Jim Mora in that Ring of Honor as well. So with all that said, I'll turn it over to you, Les. People know how I feel about this, okay? This is something that I believe Mrs. Benson and Dennis Lauscher and the management, upper management at the Saints facility, that they are the caretakers of the culture bearers of professional sports in this town. It is their responsibility not just to talk about the years that they've owned the team, but to talk about, again, those that have given so much to professional sports in the history of professional sports in this town. Okay, that's their responsibility because of the ownership and what they mean and what those players meant to this culture as well. Take it from here if you would.
Okay, well, first of all, on Sam, better late than never. I don't know why that took 16 years to do what had already been determined that he belonged there.
I agree.
I have no idea why it took so long, but I'm glad it's finally happening for Sam's sake. And, but the banners that aren't there, you know, the Saints play in the Superdome. But the Superdome is not the Saints. The Superdome's a lot more than the Saints.
I agree.
Okay, Dave Dixon, okay, was the architect, literally and figuratively, or at least figuratively, of the Superdome. Pete Maravich provided some of the most significant moments in that building of anyone.
I agree.
Coach Rob, as you mentioned, the Bayou Classic is one of the biggest annual events, along with the Sugar Bowl, in that building.
Right.
Let's not be myopic here. Okay, this building, which was built by the taxpayers of the state of Louisiana, it doesn't belong to the city, it doesn't belong to the football team. Okay, so those people were properly recognized and need to be recognized once again. Now the other one, and you and I have talked about this, I've been on the soapbox for this, Mr. Finks and Coach Mora need to go in as a tandem next. Okay, Sam's going in finally on December 2nd when they play the Cowboys. I assume they want to induct someone next year. It needs to be Mr. Finks and Coach Mora as a tandem because of the way they are connected. When Mr. Benson bought the franchise, the most significant thing he did was get rid of Bum Phillips and hired the best person he could have possibly hired in Mr. Finks, future Hall of Fame executive, very nearly the commissioner of the NFL. He immediately hired Jim Mora, and immediately the NFL said, wow, the Saints have finally figured it out.
Yes.
And almost immediately they got better. They went 7-9, and then they went to the playoffs. And they brought respectability to this organization, and Mr. Benson is responsible for that. And so I think it would behoove Mrs. Benson and Dennis Lauscher and Mickey Loomis to recognize the signature event of the early Benson era of hiring Finks and having Finks hire Mora. And Jim Mora is here. I see him at the Superdome 2 or 3 times a year working with WDSU. And he deserves to witness that inclusion of him and Mr. Finks in the Ring of Honor, and I hope it happens as soon as possible next season.
I agree. Another oversight is Pistol Pete Maravich. You and I were talking after. I talked about it on the radio show again yesterday. And folks, look, when I got my claw on something, I don't let it go. Maravich's jersey is retired by the Atlanta Hawks, the Utah Jazz, and the New Orleans Pelicans. No one is supposed to wear those jerseys. Nobody's supposed to wear number 7 for the Pelicans ever again. There was much like again, there was a ceremony for Eddie Robinson, Jim Finks, also again Pistol Pete Maravich in the Dome with the Ring of Honor, and again there was also a ceremony with Pistol Pete's wife and his 2 sons, and I was there when they unveiled that jersey in the rafters of the Smoothie King Center. After the renovation, just like the renovation of the Dome, that jersey was never put back in the rafters. That jersey is deserving to be in the rafters of the Smoothie King Center as well.
No question. And if you ask basketball fans in the city of New Orleans of our age, and I think even younger, which NBA basketball player do you associate with New Orleans? Pete Maravich is still number 1.
I agree.
Chris Ball was great. There have been a lot of good players come through here. But Pete Maravich is still number one.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question he should be up in the rafters. Again, I don't understand why it went away, but it needs to come back.
There's no doubt. They have to do the right thing from a historic significance in terms of the culture of professional sports here in New Orleans. Okay, and look, you got a situation where Drew Brees is going to go in that Ring of Honor soon. Okay, I agree with you. Finks more next year, but there has to be a place in that dome. Well, again, where folks can see, there's plenty of room there to be able to put those banners back up for Dave Dixon, Eddie Robinson, Pistol Pete Maravich, those that were taking down that Ring of Honor. If you want to put the Saints players or front office personnel on that ring, have no problem with it. Those other guys have to be recognized.
And Mr. and Mrs. Benson chose to become the custodians of sports in New Orleans.
She said it, didn't she?
And I credit them for that. I'm grateful to them for that. When they bought the Pelicans, and when they started renovating high school facilities, and when they helped Tulane and did all these other wonderful things, they invited that role as custodians of sports, particularly professional sports, in this community. And as such, they are custodians, as you said, and that requires recognizing these other people who were properly recognized previously and for some reason have gone away, and they need to come back.
I agree. Let's switch gears to LSU. Hopefully that happens soon. Hopefully they hear the cries, and hopefully more people start talking about this. Because again, we are a city that reveres our history. That's our economy. Again, we should be doing that on the sports realm as well. LSU, again, in a real tough situation now. Again, losing to Kentucky last week, getting physically manhandled, which is kind of, again, at this point, I think it's fait accompli that the Ed Ogeron era has come to a close. Your colleague over at CrescentCitySports.com, Renee Nato, did a great job in writing an article on one of the reasons why we've seen the decline of Ed Ogeron. 38 of 92 players that were recruited by Ed Ogeron either transferred, did not play it down for LSU, ultimately didn't work out, or again didn't live up to the stars that they were projected to be when they came in. The constant carousel of coordinators and coaches have hurt the development of the players on this team. And then, of course, him moving from more of a CEO role to a more hands-on role. I think all that lends to what we're seeing now, why we're seeing 2 years removed from a national championship, why a coach could be on the hot seat and was probably going to lose his job at the end of the season. You got to be able to, again, recruit well, but you got to also be able to develop, and you got to have continuity with your coaching staff. You add some of the off-the-field situations, what's happening in his personal life, it all adds up to, again, Ed Ogeron probably being, in my opinion, being fired at the end of the season. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's almost certain to happen, and I think it probably needs to happen. I mean, I wrote at the end of the 2016 season that they needed to give him the job full time, and I've preached patience.
Yes.
And I think the 2019 championship rightfully bought him the benefit of the doubt for the short term. Having said all that, the point that they're at now, I think, shows that he's not going to be able to fix it. And he's tried twice to redo the coaching staff, and it hasn't worked. And when it comes to recruiting, I don't care how many. I don't care where you get ranked. I don't care how many 4 and 5 stars you have.
True.
It's player recruitment, player development, and player retention.
Yes.
To get to Renee's story. So many people are gone without ever having the type of. It's not like they come in and have 3 great seasons and go to the NFL. Yeah, a lot of them do that, but some of them, for whatever reason, they get kicked off the team, or they get frustrated that they're not playing and they leave. There are a whole host of reasons, but you need to overcome that.
You can't lose a third of your recruiting class over the last 4 years and be able to compete at the SEC.
No, and I went back and I was reading the Florida game last year because they're playing Florida this Saturday, and that it was a desperate situation then, as it is now. They only had like 54 scholarship players go to Gainesville last year. A lot of that was injuries, but it was also the attrition of players opting out, players leaving early, players transferring because they didn't think they were going to get an opportunity at LSU. And sometimes that's on the players. They get impatient or they're unrealistic.
True, especially now with the transfer portal, the way it is, where you don't have to sit out a year with transferring.
But it's the head coach and his staff's job to find players who understand what it's going to take to find their niche in the program and to help them find that niche in the program. And it's just all sort of kind of caved in here. And I just don't see how he survives this.
Garland Gillen from Fox 8 Sports mentioned on a couple of their broadcasts this week, went back, looked at the history of Scott Woodward. He doesn't fire coaches at midseason. He allows coaches to finish out the season. He did it with Sunderland at A&M. He did it with Whittingham up in Washington. So my guess is, with Ed Orgeron saying what he said this week, but he loves being the coach of LSU. He relishes every day coming to work, no matter what's going on. That again, Ed Orgeron wants to stay the coach of LSU, no matter how bad things get. Now the question is, if it gets really bad, do you have to make a move? But at this point, again, I think Willingham was 0-12, 0-11, and they didn't fire him. So my guess is Woodward allows him to stay in place until the end of the season. I said on my radio show yesterday, everybody keeps talking about big names. I said he needs to find the next Nick Saban. He was here with Emmerich when Emmerich went out and found Saban, through his group. Part of that group was Gil Brandt, again from the former draft guru for the Dallas Cowboys. He was part of that group. Also a former Big Ten commissioner. They uncovered, so to speak, Nick Saban. Nobody knew Nick Saban was going to be the greatest coach in the history of college football when he came to LSU, but his fingerprints have lasted 20 years on this program through 2 coaches and 2 national championships. You need to find a coach like that.
Well, I agree. If you can, I'm working on a piece for CrescentCitySports.com. It'll be up in the next couple of days about how I agree. I think Orgeron will probably finish out the season, barring something unforeseen.
Yes.
So, but Scott Woodward right now should be compiling a list of candidates, and I'm sure he is. Yeah. And so I'm going to write about how I think he probably should approach compiling a list. I don't know who the next Nick Saban is. I think the first phone call should go to Chris Peterson and just find out if he's ready to come out of retirement. They have a connection from Washington. He is probably the coach out there with the most skins and least baggage on the wall if you combine the two. He may not want to do it. So there are a lot of other people, and we don't necessarily have to get into a lot of names today. But one thing I do want to say about Ed Orgeron is, he should always be remembered and respected for the 2019 season.
I agree.
Stepping in 2016 and keeping the ship afloat when Les Miles got fired. Building and building and building. Finding Joe Brady when nobody knew who Joe Brady was. Luring Joe Burrow when nobody knew who Joe Burrow was. And putting everything together for as good a season as any college football team has ever had. So fans should always be grateful to him for that. Unfortunately, this latest chapter in LSU football doesn't seem like something you can trust him with going forward.
No, and look, it comes down to, it's like a farmer with your crops. You got to continue to tend to the crops, so that you can have that bounty. When it's time to be able to pick the crops, right? The problem is 38 signees that don't make an impact out of 93 over the last 4 years. As we mentioned, revolving door coaches. All that has led to where we are today. It is what it is, and again, I agree with you. He did a great job for what he was supposed to do, but at some point he just wasn't able to sustain it. So again, you cannot, in this program today, wanting to be a top program, you have to be able to, again, strike quickly. And look, Woodward has done a great job with Mulkey. He did a great job with Johnson with the baseball team. He is expected to make a great hire for the football team. We'll see how it plays out. Look, I said it yesterday on the radio show. he was groomed to do this. You know, they talk about how much Orgeron loves LSU and grew up with LSU. So did Scott Woodward. He was groomed for this moment in time when it comes to picking this LSU football coach.
Yeah, and people call him a big game hunter.
Right.
and Kim Mulkey is a great example of that. And so he knows, he doesn't look around and necessarily say, well, who's the hot coordinator somewhere? You know, he swings for the fences.
Right.
Okay, and if he doesn't, you know, Pat Casey was somebody he talked to for the baseball job, and that fell through for a variety of reasons. But, you know, he looks around and says, who is the best person out there that I can get, whether they're unemployed, retired, doing TV, or coaching somewhere else, coaching in the NFL, whatever. Who is the best person I can get for LSU? I'm going to go after them. He may not get him. He may get his second or third choice, but he is going to swing for the fences. And if he winds up only having warning track power like they had in 2016, well, you get the best guy you can get.
Right. Well, and it should be a little different this year, okay, than in the past. And a lot of it has to do with Woodward, I got to be honest with you, with just his reputation. So we'll see how that plays out. I want to remind everybody, the last couple of times they went looking for a coach, they struck out a lot. They struck out a lot with Les Miles, but then they ended up with Les Miles. Again, they ended up with Ed Orgeron when they were trying to go in a different direction as well. So the last couple of times it hasn't been LSU jobs open and everybody's putting their applications in. No, it's been a tough sledding. So we'll see how, again, Woodward turns this around this time. I fully expect he will. All right, let's talk about Tulane. Tulane, tough season right now. Again, with the loss to Houston, 1-5, 40-22. But today we're going to concentrate on the possible regionalization and realignment of the conference. It was first reported that there might be a coming together of Conference USA, the Sun Belt, and the American into a regionalization conference. It would have gone like this. The New American would have had teams along the East Coast. Coastal Carolina, Appalachia State, Navy. South Florida, FIU, FAU, East Carolina, Charlotte, Old Dominion, Marshall, and Temple. That would have been the American. Tulane is not in the American in that scenario. The Sun Belt would have included Arkansas State, Western Kentucky, UAB. Tulane would have moved into the Sun Belt, along with Southern Miss, South Alabama, Troy, Georgia State, Georgia Southern, Middle Tennessee, and basketball only, Arkansas, Little Rock. The Conference USA, which is a former conference that Tulane was in, would have SMU, ULL, University of Texas San Antonio, Louisiana Tech. Also would have UTEP, North Texas, Rice, Tulsa, UL Monroe, Texas State, and UT Arlington as a basketball-only conference. That was the original thought when they were trying to get together the regionalization. First of all, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's becoming apparent that Tulane's going to have to settle for something along those lines. They had a nice setup with the American, with some probably being the best non-Power 5 conference in the country and being a part of it. But that, with the loss of the schools that they're losing, Cincinnati, Houston, and is it
Cincinnati, Houston,
Memphis?
No. I'm at a loss. It'll come to me. Go ahead. But Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF.
UCF.
I have it right here.
So that conference is not going to be the same. Tulane, unfortunately, I think is going to have to take a step back, and this is all trickle down from OU and Texas going to the SEC, and so, you know, Tulane's not going to be part of any power level in the NCAA.
Right.
And so whether you're playing East Carolina or Southern Miss doesn't make a whole lot of difference. In fact, I think the regional concept is better. I think it's better if Tulane plays Southern Miss every year, because their fans can go to Hattiesburg, other fans can come here. And it'd be nice if SMU and some of those other schools could come in together and maybe have it geographically a little different than that original scenario. But I think Tulane is settling into where reality is, and that is it's not going to ever be in a Power 5 league.
Right.
It has a nice, small facility on campus, play a nice regional schedule, and you're going to be a mid-level program.
You are who you are.
You are who you are. Enjoy your on-campus football. build rivalries with people in the area. And that's who you are.
I agree. Look, you made the mistake in 1966 to lead the Southeastern Conference, to think that you could be like a Notre Dame as independent. You were lucky to get into the Metro Conference, which was a basketball conference, again, way back when, which ultimately, again, morphed into Conference USA, which morphed into the American. The American was probably the strongest deal for them because, again, of the football schools that were there. But you are where you are now, with the top 3 schools in the American moving over to the Big 12. Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated reported this earlier this week. The concept that I threw out there, regionalization, was kind of shelved. First of all, Mike Arresto, who is the commissioner of the American, has not been committal on anything at this point. He's trying to be able to still poach teams from other conferences to be able to join the American to make it stronger. But again, the Conference USA has come up with a regionalization plan of their own, but they leave the Sun Belt out. The new conference would be the Western Conference would include SMU, North Texas, Rice, UTEP, Southern Miss, Tulane, Tulsa, Louisiana Tech, Wichita State, UAB, Memphis, and University of Texas San Antonio. The Eastern Conference would include East Carolina, Charlotte, Old Dominion, Temple, Marshall, FAU, FIU, South Florida, Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky, and 2 possible new additions to that side of the bracket as well. That would be a combination of Conference USA and what's left of the American merging.
Well, I think something, if not that, something similar to that is probably how it's going to shake out. I think I mentioned Southern Miss. I think Rice and SMU are the type of universities and programs that Tulane is probably going to wind up with, and is probably who they should be with. Those have been programs that they've competed against to varying degrees over the history of the program. So I think something very similar to that is going to be the best they can hope for, and I think they can be happy with that, or at least they should be.
I agree with you. Look, at this point, ACC's not coming, Big 12's not coming. So you're going to have to deal with, and if it's going to be a more regional situation, it is what it is. Obviously UNO's in the Southland. I'd love to see a situation where UNO could get in the mix here. That's not going to happen. We'll see how that kind of plays out. But we can look to more regional football, whether that's regional within the South, or again, there's going to be this is going to be a regionalization situation. Whether the Sun Belt, Conference USA, and America come together, or just will be 2 of those conferences. We'll see how it plays out really over the next 2 to 3 months. All right, let's get to the Pelicans as they get ready to open their season on Wednesday against the 76ers in the Smoothie King Center. First of all, I think this is a much more talented team than what we saw last year. There's more depth, there's more shooting. Obviously, some of these young players have to emerge, but the big question continues to be the health of Zion Williamson. The foot that had surgery on is not 100% yet. He has not even participated in training camp at all. He's been on the side, trying to get himself in shape. Griffin is supposed to have a press conference this afternoon as we are on the air, in which, again, I'm sure he's going to say he will not be ready for the opener. This is another season. This is the 3rd season in a row he's not ready for the season opener for this team. And then you compound that with him and Brandon Ingram not playing at all with their teammates during the preseason. Now, Ingram did work out with his team in the offseason, where Zion did not. Talk about this team minus, again, Zion, because he's such a force when he gets on the court. How do you adapt? It's almost a tale of 2 different teams, when he's going to be with you and when he's not.
Yeah, and that's going to be the challenge for Willie Green, a first-time head coach, not having his best player in training camp to start the season. And so trying to prepare a team without him and then having to fold him in after that, that's going to be a real challenge. I do agree that they have the possibility of being better. I think Willie's going to be a better fit as a coach than Stan Van Gundy was. Trey Murphy III obviously has a big-time shooting stroke. Right. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jackson Hayes look like they're both continuing to develop. So there's a lot to work with there. Brandon Ingram's a lot stronger than he was.
You
could see that on media day. And speaking of media day, just to clarify something, I'm pretty sure I was there, David Griffin left a little wiggle room saying the goal was for Zion to be ready for the opener. I don't think they promised that. No. So,
but it is frustrating that, once again, he is not ready for the opener.
It's frustrating because each time he has been injured, either he's wound up being sidelined longer than was projected,
Yes.
or if you, judging by Christian Clark's story a couple of weeks ago, he had an injury that was never disclosed. They said he left the bubble for personal reasons, family reasons, or whatever. So it's getting to the point where you can't trust the organization
Not at all.
when they project, when they tell you what the injury is or don't tell you what the injury is, and project how long he's going to miss. That's the frustrating part, is you just don't know. My assumption is that Williamson will be ready in the near future.
Right.
Not going to be ready for the opener, I don't think. And so hopefully he comes back and he's able to play close to an entire season. But we don't know that. But at this point, it's just more of the same. And some of it's just bad luck that he gets hurt.
Right.
But, boy, not having him for the opener is disappointing, and it really puts a challenge on Willie Green as he begins his career as a head coach.
And I got to say it again, because I've harped on this. He needed to go in the offseason and expand his game. He's got to be a double-digit rebound guy. He's a 7-rebound-a-game guy. He's got to be able to develop a mid-range shot. He's got to be more than just a guy that can go to the basket and bully his way in. He's also got to be able to play defense, both, again, individual defense and team defense, two things he has not done. Brandon Ingram as well on the defensive side of the ball. So what did he do in the offseason to get better? And that's what I'm looking to see.
Well, and how much could he do with a broken foot?
There you go.
So, I don't know.
He's a one-dimensional player right now.
Yeah, he is. He's a really good
He's an incredible one-dimensional player.
He really is.
Okay.
But, yeah, you're right. There are other facets of his game that need to get better, and that mostly happens during the offseason.
The greats always do, right? Every great player in the history of the NBA worked on a part of their game that was deficient in the offseason.
Right. And he lost most of his offseason. Apparently, he was doing that.
Yeah,
he was working on his game when he hurt his foot.
That's what they tell us, but can you believe what they tell us?
Well, no, you can't take it. You have to take everything with a grain of salt at this point. But, presumably, he's a competitor. Right. I trust that he was doing what he needed to do to get better.
Right.
And then he gets hurt. And so he misses a lot of the offseason and misses all of training camp. So it's unfortunate. I don't know what to expect from this team. No one does. No. But I do think having Willie Green is a ray of sunshine. Mm-hmm. I'm really impressed by him. I want to see what he can do. And I think there are a lot of young players that are promising. And I think the pieces have a chance to fit together better than the pieces last year did. So we'll see. There's just a sort of a cloud hanging over this whole thing because of Williamson's injury. Yep. And until we see all the pieces together for an extended period of time, no one knows what to expect from this group.
Les East, thanks so much for joining us as always.
Thank you.
All right, Les East of CrescentCitySports.com, and of course, accomplished author as well. All right, thanks for tuning in. I say it every week. So many ways to catch our program now. Again, the first rebroadcast is at 6 o'clock tonight on LAE. There's a second rebroadcast at 10 o'clock tonight on The Deuce, WLAE-TV 2. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock Pelican Sports Television, 10 o'clock WLE. Saturday morning at 2 a.m. on The Deuce, 5 p.m. on Saturday afternoon on Pelican Sports Television. Always at ericasher.com, always on the WLAE-TV YouTube page, always on our social media platforms, at Eric_Asher on Twitter, Eric Asher on Facebook. So again, a lot of ways to catch the program. Also, catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. That's weekdays 4 to 6, taking you home every afternoon. You can also check us out on the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, ericasher.com, and 106.1 FM's website as well. Again, special thanks to the folks here at WLAE-TV who do a fantastic job, including our fantastic underwriters that make this show possible. Please support our underwriters. Also, the production staff. Outstanding. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, also Will Ingram, Alex Chacon, and I'm telling you, the best director in the business, William Hill. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Les East, I'm Eric Asher. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you right back here next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.